Here are the top 10 game systems I have spent the most lifetime hours playing, probably. Number 10, the Game Boy Advance. Spoiler, this will be the only handheld system on this list. For a couple of years, the Game Boy Advance was pretty much my only game system. And during that time, I played through Metroid Fusion, Metroid Zero Mission, and all three of the Metroid-like Castlevania games. Not only that, I reached 100% completion on all 5 of those games. I'm not trying to brag, but I just want to give you an indication of the amount of time I poured into this little system. In recent years, I played through both Advance War games and dabbled in a lot of other games. By the way, estimating the total amount of playing time I put into these various systems was quite a mental challenge, given that I've been playing games for over 40 years. It's not the easiest top 10 list I've had to do, but I am satisfied with the results. Number 9 is the PS3. This one is odd because I never really played it until recent years. A while back, I learned that someone had created a private server for Killzone 2 multiplayer, and I wanted to give it a try. I ended up playing it routinely over a 2-year period. Every Saturday, they would have these big events where everybody would get online at the same time and play. Over those 2 years, I would imagine I racked up a lot of hours. I also ended up playing all the way through Killzone 3 and God of War 3, but not much else on the PS3. Number 8 is the Sega Saturn. Despite my mixed feelings about the previous 2 Sega systems, the Sega CD and the 32X, I was all in on the Sega Saturn. I got it a few months after the surprise launch and played quite a bit of Virtua Fighter, Galactic Attack, Mr. Bones, Panzer Dragoon 1 and 2, Sega Rally. I also put a lot of time into games that I ended up not liking in the end, like Robotica, but I spent my money on them, so I forced myself to play them at least a little bit. The one game that absolutely hooked me was Ironstorm. I likely put hundreds of hours into that one. Number 7 is the Sega Dreamcast. It's thinking. There was a time where I kind of lost my passion for video games, but when the Dreamcast came along, it reawakened my love for them. These games had graphics that blew the hair off my head. That's probably why I'm going bald today. I played a lot of Crazy Taxi, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Toy Commander, and Soul Calibur. I also had friends that had a Dreamcast, and they loved the sports games a lot. I didn't play a bunch of those, but I did participate in an NFL 2K tournament with them. Due to life commitments, I wasn't able to play as much as I wanted to play back then, but when I started collecting games many years later, I ended up going back and logging probably an equal amount of hours into the Dreamcast as I did back then. Sorry ladies, I'm already married. Number 6 is the Super Nintendo. Based on what I know about my audience, most of them would probably have this one higher on their own personal lists. Me and my friends had Super Nintendos back during the heyday, but at the same time, there was strong competition from another console, which you might see later on this list. I also know that many people enjoyed the RPGs of the Super Nintendo. I did not play any of those, but I did pour a lot of hours into Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, and Super Contra. Me and my friends also played a lot of Street Fighter. Like, we would play it again and again over a matter of weeks. The game I spent the most hours on was likely Super Metroid. I played through it multiple times, and I achieved 100% each go-around. I never got rid of my Super Nintendo and always had some games nearby, and occasionally I would pop in some of them, such as Super Smash TV. Number 5 is the first PlayStation. I have to believe that most gamers in the mid-1990s was at some point playing PlayStation 1 games. I was living with friends at the time, and one of them had a PS1 in the living room, and let's just say I utilized it a lot. I played some very long games, such as Final Fantasy VII, which I remember taking about a month or 2 to complete. Even after beating it, I kept going back to it to beat some of the extra bosses that it had. I also played through Symphony of the Night and Colony Wars. We played some multiplayer games together as well, like Poi Poi and Tekken. After moving out, I bought my own PS1 and kept playing games for years to come. Now that I'm in my retro phase, I have accumulated a nice PS1 collection, and I've been tapping that. Number 4 is a shocker, the Atari 2600. Games on the 2600 were short affairs compared to games on more advanced systems, but the fact that I played so many titles over many years, and the fact that I simply had nothing else to play during those days, means that I accumulated a lot of play hours. The ones I continuously went back to were Pitfall, E.T., yes, I'm not trying to be funny, I actually played it a lot, Missile Command, Berserk, Defender, and Demon Attack. Basically, it was the same games that the public still reveres today. Back then, each kid had their own collection and we would trade a lot, so that added to the hours as well. As many people around me grew up, they abandoned the 2600, but I kept playing. I even got the reissue in 1986 and kept on playing with that. So I think I played the 2600 over a 7-year period, which is quite a long time. Number 3 is the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES came at just the right time in America, and for me. There had been a video game vacuum, so to speak, and now Nintendo arrived and reinvigorated the genre. I was hooked on the NES as soon as I got one for Christmas, and during the following years, I received a lot of games for birthdays and Christmas, and just like the Atari, I would trade with friends as well. And eventually, I was renting games. Compared to the 2600, these were obviously more involved to play, so I ended up logging a lot of hours. It was like the first time I ever felt like I was getting addicted to video games, because I would play before school, after school, and over the weekends. The games you would have witnessed me playing were Jackal, Contra, Life Force, all the Mario games, all the Zelda games, Mega Man. Metroid was probably the one I spent the most hours playing. Nowadays, I honestly don't find myself going back to the NES as much as other systems, but all those hours during the mid-1980s adds up, and that's why it's at number 3. Number 2 is the PS4. This is the one where I really started to get into online first-person shooters. Prior to that, I had only played online on the Dreamcast, and that game was Quake 3. The thing about playing online multiplayer games is that once you get good at them, you tend to keep coming back, so the hours keep totaling up. That's what I did for the PS4. I played a lot of Rainbow Six Siege, Blacklight Retribution, Titanfall 2, and Killzone Shadowfall. The Killzone Shadowfall multiplayer literally changed the course of my gaming life until they took the servers down. But that's the game that got me into the Killzone series, and from there I went backward and played a lot of the older Killzone games. I even created a Killzone-centered channel. It wasn't just first-person shooters I played though. I played A Way Out, Detroit Become Human, It Takes Two, and a lot of other long games. Number 1 is the Sega Genesis. I got the Genesis during its launch, which was also around the time I started working my first job, and I spent many dollars on Genesis games out of my very small paychecks. I couldn't help myself because the hit titles kept coming and coming for the Genesis. And later on in life, when I started collecting games, I ended up spending even more dollars on the Genesis. In preparation for this video, I was writing down all the games I remember playing on the Genesis, and that list became so long, I just knew it was going to be number 1 today. And I'll just read some of them off. Bimini Run, Castle of Illusion, Columns, Forgotten Worlds, Philios, Moonwalker, Thunder Force 2 and 3, Sonic the Hedgehog, Outrun, Streets of Rage 1 through 3, Cyberball, Herzog's Way, Dune, Warsong, Shining Force, Phantasy Star 2, Clax. You get the point. I don't think there will ever be another game system that I play as much as I did for the Genesis, but what there will be more of is videos on this Gaming the Systems channel. You can see a couple of them on the screen right here. I hope you enjoyed this top 10 list. Take care, everybody.